Hey everyone, Chris from NOVRITSCH here. The gameplay you're watching is from a Milsim in Hungary. Earlier this year, it was my first proper Milsim after a long break from Airsoft, because I had spent most of the previous years in China and Taiwan with factories. It was also the first game where I used a mass-produced SR-74. That made this game surprisingly emotional for me. After years of prototypes, failures, factory visits and moments where this project made me want to pull my hair out, I could finally run and shoot people with this HE at a field, rather than testing it at a factory floor. And while playing, I started thinking about how much my relationship with Airsoft has changed over the years. I started almost 20 years ago as an introverted teenager who wanted nothing more than to play every single weekend. Later, Airsoft became my job, then a company, and eventually something I barely played at all. So this is the story of how my motivation for Airsoft went up, disappeared, came back, and changed completely over the years. I was 14 when I first came into contact with what felt like a proper Airsoft gun. A friend showed me a spring-powered pistol with hop-up, and at that time I didn't even know what hop-up was. All I knew was that the gun could shoot through several layers of paper, and to 14-year-old me, that was incredible. Of course I needed one, and my mom absolutely did not want me to own an Airsoft gun. So my friend secretly used his mom's credit card, I gave him the cash, and he ordered 2 pistols for around 20 euros each. Mine was a Beretta 92 FS, but when those pistols arrived, they meant everything to us. I grew up in the countryside surrounded by fields and forests, so we started playing around my parents' house. We invited friends, hid in bushes, made improvised camouflage and spent hours shooting at each other wearing sweaty skiing goggles. I would constantly think about Airsoft. How could I make the gun shoot further? How could I become harder to see? What clothes and gear should I wear? What could I modify? At that point, I didn't even know that the Airsoft community existed. It generally felt like we had invented the sport ourselves. And then one day, the police showed up. Running around outdoors with realistic looking guns, it's obviously not something that I recommend. The police stopped our games and suddenly I had a problem. I had discovered this amazing hobby, but I wasn't allowed to continue doing it the way we had been doing it. So I started researching. I found out that we needed permission from landowners, that the police should know what was happening, and that everything would be easier if we were an official sports club. So that's what I did. I founded an official club, talked to people who own forests, and helped organize legal games. Looking back, that shows how obsessed I already was. My mom said no, so I found another way to buy the gun. The police stopped us, so I found a legal way to organize games. Every roadblock just made me more determined. Around that time, I found a YouTube channel by the name of Vavan56. It's a French airsoft sniper, and he was the first person to use a scope camera, a head camera, and even a camera pointing at himself. Today, multiple camera angles in airsoft videos are normal, but back then I had never seen anything like it. I watched his 5 videos he had uploaded again and again, and I wanted to do exactly what he was doing. Naturally, I then made the classic beginner mistake. I bought a cheap sniper rifle. It was an HEM MP001, a very cheap VS10 clone. My friends bought HEs, which were much more practical, while I had a slow bolt action rifle that didn't shoot particularly well. I was at a huge disadvantage, but I couldn't afford to replace it, so I just had to make it work. I started upgrading it, learning how hop-up system worked, tested different parts, and slowly learning how to play as a sniper. That limitation probably shaped my entire future in Airsoft, because I only had that rifle and became obsessed with understanding it. During the week, I was living at a boarding school, and on weekends I came home and wanted to play. Almost every single weekend I organized the game and pushed my friends to join it. Sometimes there were 6 of us, sometimes only 3. It was never really a huge event, but it didn't matter. We had a blast. Airsoft was really all I wanted to do. I spent my money on gear and had zero interest in partying. During school, instead of paying attention, even there I drew ideas for loadouts and thought about what I wanted to change next on my rifle. I definitely missed things at school because my mind was constantly somewhere in the forest. We all owned terrible Austrian military surplus equipment because it was all we could afford. Then I attended my first larger airsoft events and saw molly gear for the first time. The idea that you could place every pouch exactly where you wanted, that completely blew my mind. Everything was new, every piece of equipment felt exciting, every weekend gave me something to look forward to. I also remember one small moment from a game where another player came up to me and said, "You're one of the few people who actually understand how to play as a sniper." Man, that one sentence meant a lot to me back then, and looking back, it's kind of funny, but really, it meant the world to me. Before I had a large channel, before people knew my name, I just wanted to be good at this thing that I loved, and being recognized for it just felt incredible. At 18, because I was already so interested in airsoft military equipment and shooter games, I chose military service instead of civil service. And of course, I signed up for sniper trainings and moved to the capital of Austria, Vienna, because that was the only place where I could do that. I expected it to be the ultimate version of airsoft, and let me tell you one thing, it wasn't whatsoever. Going from civilian life into the army was quite a shock. At school you're told that you are a special snowflake and you can ask questions when you're unsure about something. And at the military it's quite different. Yeah, you're treated as bad as everyone else, you're as worthless as everyone else, and asking questions might just get you into trouble and you're being shouted at. There was little sleep, constant physical training, cleaning, waiting, and more cleaning. We spent far more time maintaining rifles than actually shooting them. In fact, we didn't shoot them at all for the first 2 months even. In the beginning, that was just soul-crushing. After a while, however, we adapted, the sniper course became more interesting, we built ghillie suits, trained in the field, and eventually got to shoot sniper rifles. My group also became very close and I made great friends, partly because we all had the same enemy, the instructors pushing us whenever anyone made a mistake, and we made a lot of mistakes. But something strange happened. Before the army, I played airsoft every weekend and barely partied. During military service, I handled guns and slept in forests all week, so on weekends, airsoft was the last thing I wanted to do. Instead, I went out and partied. By the end of the army, I was also tired of forests and rifles and cleaning equipment, and I actually listed my VSR 10 with the scope cam on, this big camcorder. I already had it on sale at a second-hand website. Thankfully, nobody bought it. I already had made a couple very basic airsoft videos by that point. I mounted a camcorder to my gun, borrowed a GoPro, and filmed a few videos of our local forest games. You can still find that video on the channel. It's quite rough, but it was just the beginning. Back then, YouTube was not paying any ad revenue to Austrian channels, so I really made videos just because I enjoyed creating them, and probably because I enjoyed the intention. Maybe that wasn't the purest motivation, but it pushed me to start. After the army, I generally thought airsoft might be over for me. Then, after a few months, the feeling came back. I wanted to be in the forest again, I wanted to hide, move, shoot, and experience those little weekend adventures. At the time, I was working as an elevator technician, and for the first time I had a regular income, so I could afford to improve my gear and travel to games. I also continued making videos, then something magical happened. YouTube actually activated the partner program for Austria, and the channel all of a sudden made some revenue. Videos that I had made for fun earned money, and at that point the channel was making around half of what I earned at my day job. That really changed everything. Until then, I had uploaded roughly 1 video per year, and I started thinking, what would happen if I upload every week? It was quite a simple equation, and yeah, the channel reached 100,000 subscribers quite fast. Then I quit my job and announced on the channel that I would become a full-time airsofter. That period was probably the purest peak of airsoft for me. I played almost every weekend, I traveled, I met people from the industry, I flew to the United States to visit Chad Desert Fox, my idol back then actually, and for the first time met someone who also was making a living from airsoft, which was just really impressive for me. Companies such as G&G, Red Wolf and Evic helped me travel around the US. I experienced huge games, new fields, training facilities, blank fire scenarios in direct action missions, vehicles in games, and types of gameplay I had never seen in Austria. My life was basically playing airsoft, filming it, and sharing it with the community. It was amazing. Financially, however, it was still quite rough. YouTube and sponsorships made just enough money for me to survive, and I stayed at Chad's place because I couldn't really afford my own accommodation in Los Angeles. My diet back then was almost entirely oatmeal mixed in a blender with water and protein powder. It was not exactly fine dining, but it was efficient. I wanted to spend more time playing and less time editing, so I started working with a friend of mine. But paying another person from a small YouTube income wasn't that easy. I began looking for another way to support the channel and create enough income to continue this life and create even more content. Sponsorships from airsoft companies were nice, but it was nowhere near enough to actually pay a full salary for an editor, so that idea eventually led to products. During a trip to a Taiwanese airsoft gun show, I met a company called Modify, and they had a sniper rifle called the Mod 24. I visited the factory and opened this rifle, and the internals looked amazing, so I thought, how in the world is nobody using this rifle but VSR 10s instead that would break immediately and you have to change every single part. But then I shot it and it didn't perform as well as it should, given how the parts looked and how the quality of the rifle was. I started working on it and I found lots of problems with a way too sharp nozzle, the hopper bomb, the air seals and other small details, and I actually spent a couple months basically changing the parts and modifying the parts, trying to make the rifle work consistently. Eventually I thought, I've now solved most of those problems, why not order 100 rifles instead of just one for me, prepare them properly and offer them to people who want a sniper rifle that works without years of, upgrading and making terrible decisions about upgrade parts and all of these finicky tuning. That decision became the beginning of NOVRITSCH as a product company, as that's when the SSG-24 launched. And that is where my relationship with airsoft changed again. Before, my life was really simple. I played games, made videos, and tried to earn enough money to continue doing it. Suddenly overnight, we had thousands of pre-orders, warehouse problems, legal problems, payment providers blocking transactions because they saw airsoft products gun-related, then factories were missing deadlines, and customers expected us to solve everything immediately. I had never run a company before. I was an electrician and self-taught airsoft technician trying to understand manufacturing, logistics, customer service, law, finance and quality control all at the same time. Some early SSG24 magazines developed feeding issues in hot, dusty environments. I had tested the rifle in winter plenty, but there the ground was wet and there was almost no dust. The problem simply never appeared during my testing. Then customers in hotter, dustier fields started using the rifles and some magazines stopped feeding properly after a few hundred shots. While this happened, I was in Tyrol filming a 2-week-long sniper training series with the Austrian military. So I was trying to create videos while receiving customer complaints and attempting to solve an injection molding tolerance problem from the other side of the world. That was probably one of the most stressful periods of my life and sleep quality started degrading. So playing airsoft was no longer a priority. The priority was fixing the product, helping customers, growing the team and making sure the company actually survives. My passion did not disappear, but it completely shifted. I became less excited about simply playing airsoft and more excited about creating airsoft products. I loved sitting with a team, brainstorming an idea, building prototypes, testing them, finding problems and eventually seeing a real product come out of it. The process could at times be incredibly frustrating. Products took years, factories made mistakes, prototypes failed, parts that worked perfectly in one test suddenly failed in mass production. But when something finally worked and players enjoyed it, that feeling was extremely rewarding. And then COVID arrived. We had just started building a design and engineering team in Asia so that we could work more closely with factories, but soon afterwards travel stopped because of COVID. There were no games, I could not visit factories, I could not perform quality checks in person, and at the same time demand increased and quality problems became harder to control. That period damaged our reputation in some areas and honestly some of the criticism was justified. We were creating innovative products, but we did not yet have the local structures and people needed to control mass production quality properly overseas. So once COVID was over, I immediately jumped on a plane and flew back to Asia and spent lots of time there. I hired engineers and quality control staff close to the factories, we built processes, inspection standards and local teams. That work was absolutely necessary, but it also meant I almost completely stopped playing airsoft. In Hong Kong, space is way too limited to have a decent game, and in China it's straight up illegal. On top of that, all my gear was in Austria while I was on the other side of the world. I also stepped back from marketing as I purely wanted to focus on products, and Joseph took over more of that side of the company. For several years, most of my energy went into products, factories, engineering and quality control. That's why the channel slowed down a lot. It was not because I suddenly hated airsoft. I was simply focused on building the structure behind the company. And that brings us to now. The good news is that the work paid off. Today we have engineering and quality control teams in both Europe and Asia. The company is much more stable and I no longer need to personally stand inside every factory to make sure things happen. There will always be problems. That is manufacturing. But we now have the people and systems to find those problems and solve them. For the first time in years, I can finally put real energy back into playing. My goal for this year is to attend as many interesting games as possible, travel again, test our products in real conditions and create videos I genuinely enjoy making. Not only traditional airsoft games, but also Milsims, laser games in China, as you've seen, Nerf in Australia, all that kind of stuff. And this game in Hungary felt like the beginning of that new chapter. I was back in the mud, playing with friends, carrying equipment we had designed and using a production SSR-74 that had taken years to finish. When you develop a product for a long time, it can stop feeling like a fun airsoft gun. It becomes a spreadsheet, a tolerance problem, a factory argument, a list of defects, and another prototype that needs to be shipped across the world. Then I finally took it to a game. I loaded the magazine, walked onto the field, pulled the trigger, and remembered why we started doing all of this. Because airsoft is simply fun. It gives you adventure, movement, competition, travel, friendship, and stories to remember for years. My motivation has changed many times. At 14, I wanted to own the coolest gun and play with my friends. As a teenager, I wanted to become a good sniper. When I started YouTube, I wanted to share those experiences and probably get some recognition for it. When YouTube became my job, I wanted to play as much as possible and build a life around airsoft. When the company started, my motivation shifted towards creating products and away from playing in videos. And for several years, building the company took me away from actually playing the sport. Now I feel like those parts are finally coming together again. I can play, create content, and test the products we have spent years developing. I know how unusual this life is. It is extremely rare to discover something at 14, stay obsessed with it, and somehow turn it into a career, a company, and a life that still feels exciting almost 20 years later. I'm incredibly grateful for that. And I'm also grateful to everyone who has followed this journey, watched the videos, supported the company, criticized us whenever we needed it, and continued coming back. Without the community, none of this would exist. So, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to playing more, traveling more, building better products, and hopefully making some of the best airsoft videos we have ever created. For now, enjoy the rest of the gameplay.
Oh, nice kid.
Yeah, that's what you call blind fire.